You know that the mainstream media is funded by the military-industrial complex, and it's also funded by Wall Street, and those are two people who make a lot of money off of war. And also they're funded by fossil fuel companies, which are people who the wars actually also help. And so it's the triumvirate of funding. And so that's how if you want to see why you're not getting the news, it's look at who funds them. All right. And so that's a big part of it. And here is Chuck Todd. By the way, never graduated college. Chuck Todd, he says, go inside our exclusive war games with CNAS. The year is 2027. The briefing, China is poised to attack Taiwan. Which side would prevail? Would China attack the U.S. mainland? Could nuclear war break out? Watch the full episode on Peacock TV and at meetthepress.com. So cool. It's like a teaser at the end of an MCU movie. Ukraine was just the beginning, but now Thanos is coming. That's what's happening. So here it is. This is now This is amazing. This is Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. And they're going to go to a think tank that's funded by the military-industrial complex. And they made a video playing out what would happen. How would a war work out between us and nuclear-powered China? Just for shits and giggles, they did this on a Sunday afternoon. You ready for this? Hold on to your... because mine almost fell off.
Welcome back. In our final episode of this season's Meet the Press Reports, we put together a remarkable war game simulation of how the U.S. might react if China invaded Taiwan. The National Security Think Tank Center for a New American Security, or CNAS, convened two teams. The blue team representing the United States and the red team representing China. Which side would prevail? Would China attack the U.S. mainland? Could nuclear war break out? The conflict takes place in 2027. There are 3 rounds of strategy, and I spoke to the game master after each round to see where the conflict stood. Here's a look.
Boy, who is NBC for? I can't wait to watch a think tank play Risk live on the Chuck Todd Show. Because that's what this is. Hey, China has seen our reaction in Ukraine, and we want to make sure we're surprising them here. I got to admit, it's pretty smart to broadcast your war plan on MSNBC where no one will see it. By the way, why would the U.S. war hawkishness, why would that be surprising on any level to anyone? Hey, here's the one move no one will expect from the United States. War. Here we go.
As you can see here on the map is a very large concentration of Chinese People's Liberation Army forces at potential ports of debarkation for an invasion.
We want to focus on a last-ditch effort to deter. This is a time to be sending the strongest possible message to Beijing, both privately and publicly.
I like how they say this is our last-ditch effort to deter, as if they're anti-war somehow. Isn't that amazing? Did you hear what she said here? So this is our last-ditch effort to deter. We're the peace bringers. We're the ones who don't want conflict. And that's why we're doing this imagined World War III on television to get everybody used to it. That China is our enemy that we have to go to war with. That's what this is. That's what the point of this propaganda is. And don't think these same people didn't think that, hey, it would be a good idea to push this to Chuck Todd at MSNBC and NBC News and have them get the population ready for a war with China. Because that's what Russiagate was for 5 fucking years. It was getting us ready for this war in Ukraine. And so what this is getting us ready for is a war with China, which is why Joe Biden was allowed to end the 2-decade-long war in Afghanistan, because they had 2 more wars lined up for them, plus Somalia. Jeez. Okay.
There will be very severe costs if they actually go through with this.
China has sort of seen our reaction to Ukraine, and we want to make sure that we're surprising them with...
Yes! We're going to surprise them. How? By videotaping our plans and then showing them on the news. We're going to surprise them. This is amazing.
We react here.
Hit the Americans as hard as we possibly can in the Western Pacific, keep them out of the fight while we move on Taiwan.
I would support early knockout punch against Guam. the priority for the first 24 hours is to try to go as fast as possible against Taipei, right? I think it matters to deter United States, Japan, Australia, and other countries from intervening.
All right, Stacey, high level here. What just happened with Move 1?
China's invaded Taiwan. It began by attacking Taiwan's outlying islands near the mainland. Then it followed it with a large air and missile strike on Taiwan and on U.S. bases in Japan and on U.S. bases in Guam and the Northern Marianas. In response to that, the United States followed up with bomber attacks on U.S.
They're doing this on national television. This is not something they're doing at a conference for a few people to talk about. They're doing this on NBC News. And the reason they're doing this is so when they actually do go to war with China, you're okay and you won't push back. And that's what Chuck Todd, that's why he has this job. And that's why we have this job. Okay.
And Jimmy,
Chinese,
imagine if you're watching TV and you flip on the segment halfway through. So you miss the fact that it's a war game, a bunch of neocons playing dress up. If you watch it halfway through, all of a sudden you hear Chuck Todd saying, all right, so China's attacked Taiwan. Now we're bombing China. So you'd think we're in World War III or, World War IV at this point because we're already in a war with Russia. But it's like, they don't think about that because this is their fantasy. They want this. And this is their way to act it out and test it out with the public to see how the public responds to this. Because as you say, they're preparing us for war, which is their job.
In port, and there was an air battle over Taiwan where American aircraft flying from the Philippines came in and engaged in combat with Chinese aircraft that were trying to bomb Taiwan.
So after Move 1, can you assess which team is winning? If you want to find out what the winning move was, and I'm sure you do, check out Meet the Press Report.
What was the winning move? I'm going to bet it was a nuclear bomb. Because that's the win. That's how you win. Whoever goes nuclear first wins. That's what Chuck Todd's saying, right? Oh, it's a teaser. Let's see who's going to win the nuclear war. The mass media now teaming up with the military-industrial complex think tanks to replicate a U.S. hot war with China for a mainstream audience. This is getting crazier and crazier. You've got to have your head up your ass not to see where this is headed. Maybe having to remove gays from the military because it's not popular with the Chinese market. I think that's what's happening. That's where I think this is headed. China's quest for economic political domination threatens America's security. Director Wray discusses threats posed by governments of China. So, wait, China's a huge threat to our safety? Gosh, maybe we should stop having them do all our gain of function research and producing all our essential goods in this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that if they're such a threat, maybe we'd want to start manufacturing things here in the United States that we need, like, medicine, masks, stuff like that. Aaron, would you like to come in? Would you like to comment on that video and what Chuck Todd is having to say?
I can't think of a country that normalizes war like we do here in the U.S. I'm sure other countries do war games all the time and they simulate what it's like to go to war with the U.S. I'm sure China does that. But to put it on national television as if it's totally normal, as if it's like a quotidian thing to do to wage war against China over Taiwan, that speaks to how ingrained war is in the psyche of this country, or at least the psyche of the corporate media, which does the bidding of the national security state. And it's like, right now we're already in this war with Russia. That's been widely admitted. Steny Hoyer, top Democrat, just said this on the House floor recently. We're at war right now. And so people are dealing with that, dealing with the fallout from that and the fears of that, which ultimately could mean nuclear war with Russia. And now all of a sudden they're rolling out a new war for us to get prepared for. It's just insane. And of course, who is this think tank, the Center for New American Security? They don't mention who actually funds this think tank, but it's like a who's who of the defense industry. They're so embedded with the national security state that the Pentagon is funding the Center for New American Security at two different levels. They're at like the $500,000 level and also at a lower level too. And Boeing Raytheon, all the favorites. They're all there supporting this think tank, which of course NBC never mentions.
So here are there. Here's who does donate and supports financially this think tank that did a war game that NBC News showed on national television. So it says, CNAS is grateful to the generous donors who help make our work possible. With this support, the center can continue to develop bold, innovative ideas to shape and elevate the national security debate during a period of great change. We thank all the donors who have supported CNAS since its funding. Do you want to know who it is? These are the people giving $500,000 and above. Northrop Grumman. U.S. Department of Defense, Secretary of the... So there you go. So that's another one. Here's another one. Here's 100 to 200. Amazon Web Services, who are in bed with the CIA. Charles Koch Institute, Cisco Systems, Facebook, and Eric Wendy Schmidt. Oh, Google, the Heinz family, Microsoft, Palantir, Raytheon, the U.S. Department. So there it is. So let's want to see some more. Here's some more. David Swimmer. I'm not David Swimmer, that guy from Friends. Who knew he was such a big war hawk? Who knew that? So that is who. Hey, maybe if we made all our scumbag corporations stop working for China, would that maybe help a little? Maybe, I don't know. So let's get back to. I want to show you this. So you see the warmongering. U.S. intel officials detailed threats from China and Russia. That's from March of this year. There's another one. From the Financial Times. The U.S. holds high-level talks with U.K. over China threat to Taiwan. There's another one. U.S. says China's pressure on Taiwan a threat to all democracies. Well, if she thinks that's a threat, wait till she finds out about TikTok. U.S. Navy warship challenges Chinese territorial claim in the South China Sea. Here we go. And China is threatening its neighbors, but U.S. can put a stop to it. Really? How can we stop it? We can't even say a Wuhan virus leaked from a Wuhan virus lab in the United States, but we're supposed to stop China. Look, we all know there's one way to stop it. You want to stop China? This is how you stop China. We sent Hunter Biden deep undercover as a crackhead looking to get money for his dad. Code name the big guy. And after checking into a Beijing hotel to get a foot job from Mulan, he loses his laptop. Then when they try to access the data, it gives them a virus. That's how we're going to beat China. And that is no disparaging of people who have dependency problems. That is not So, and here's one more. Opinion, the Chinese threat, no one is talking about. Really? No one's talking about it, even though China makes all our cell phones? People still aren't talking about it. That's kind of ironic. And here is CNAS, the Center for the New American Security, developing strong, pragmatic, and principled national security and defense policies. Jesus Christ. Imagine if the Crips had that on their website, if the Crips had a website. We're developing pragmatic, principled, and security for South Central Los Angeles. CNAS, so here it is. CNAS co-founder Michelle Flournoy. She's a frontrunner to be named Secretary of Defense. This is from November 2020. She recently wrote an article where she emphasized how important it was that the U.S. military be able to credibly threaten to sink all Chinese vessels in the South China Sea in 72 hours. So that's who that is. That's who she was on that film, by the way, I showed you. She was sitting in there. Yeah. She was the one who said we have to make sure we can stop their invasion. And the think tank in question, CNAS, employed the man assigned to head Biden's Pentagon task force in China. The man believes Trump was insufficiently hawkish towards Beijing. So that's what's going on. you voted for it. Now, how does it make you feel, Aaron, to know you voted for Joe Biden and he's a bigger war hawk than Donald Trump was? And what do you say to yourself?
Well, first of all, I didn't vote.
God damn it, you're Canadian.
Yeah.
Oh, you're so lucky, because if you weren't Canadian, you would have voted for him.
No, but look, Jimmy, look. You raise a fair point. I was arguing that a Biden administration would be less of a threat to the planet than a Trump administration would be. And so far, I've been proven wrong. I mean, one of the main reasons that I had to make that argument was because Biden was going to return to the New START treaty, the last treaty limiting the stockpiles of the U.S. and Russia, which Trump was about to kill. Now, Biden did do that. That's the one positive thing that Biden's done. But everything after that, I also thought that Biden was going to return to the Iran nuclear deal. He hasn't. And when it comes to Ukraine, Biden's policy has been even more reckless than Trump's. And Trump's policy was actually really reckless, too. So the choices were not very good. But yes, it's insane what Biden has done. And that the fact that this war game is coming from this think tank is an ominous warning. Is a very ominous warning because they're very tight with the Biden administration. As you say, Flournoy was going to be Biden's defense secretary. He then settled on Lloyd Austin pretty much at the last minute. But she's very tight with Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State. And she's been at the forefront of this sort of like neocon and neoliberal nexus that's been happening for the last 30 or so years. She served under Clinton, and she authored this very influential defense strategy that called for full spectrum dominance and called for basically the U.S. going to war, not just for self-defense, but to ensure access to vital resources, which basically means going to war to help ensure U.S. control over the world. And that's what this saber rattling towards China is about. China poses no military threat at all to the U.S., but China, because it's developing economically, is becoming a economic power, the top in the world, arguably, and is setting its own course and is not following U.S. orders. That makes it a threat to U.S. hegemony. And so that's why people who are funded by the companies that profit from U.S. hegemony have to come up with ways to try to destabilize and warmonger against China.
I hate doing predictions, but it seems they're bent on a war with China. I just like they're bent on a war with Russia. And it seems like John Bolton has somehow taken over the United States foreign policy. It seems like it's crazier than it could ever possibly have ever been before. This is just, Barack Obama refused to arm Ukraine. And now we're giving them $50 billion for war, which is almost as much money as Russia spends on their entire military.
Things have gotten so crazy that the Squad and the entire Congressional Progressive Caucus, as you covered, voted unanimously for this $40 billion package for Ukraine, most of it going to the weapons industry. I've never seen things more insane. And yeah, I agree with you. They do seem like they want to go to war with China. And by the way, I'd be curious how this war game deals with this. But look, the U.S. has no military assets that can really even defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. So really, what are they talking about using then? As you say, it looks like it's nuclear weapons because China controls the naval area around there. So what does the U.S. expect to do? Fly warplanes there that could be shot down by China? It's suicidal, and everything the Biden administration appears to be promoting, whether it's in China or in Ukraine, will ultimately lead to Ukraine war, to nuclear war. Right now, the only restraining force still appears to be the Pentagon. It's not the Pentagon that's gaming out war games, or at least making public war games with China. It's the Pentagon that's actually been trying to resist those who have been calling for a no-fly zone inside of Ukraine, because the Pentagon knows that means World War III. So now and also it's been people inside the Pentagon who've been leaking stuff that undermines the warmongering claims of people like these think tanks and people in the State Department that want to justify an increased proxy war against Russia. So right now we're counting on the Pentagon to restrain us from war.
That's amazing.
And meanwhile, the Squad can't even reach the level of the Pentagon in standing up to warmongers. It's a scary time.
The Squad can't even reach the level of Marjorie Taylor Greene or Rand Paul.
That's right.
That's how sad it is. We only have right-wingers standing up against war, and we have every left-winger, or, they're self-described left-wingers. When you vote for $50 billion without debate to ramp up a war with a nuclear power, you are no longer a lefty. I hate to break it to you, but what you're doing is advocating for annihilation of the human species. That's worse than anything you can think of. That's worse than, so to talk about racism. What do you think is going to happen now? Just because of this kind of war footing that the United States is on and what the Squad has done, do you have any predictions what will happen politically? I said that the political parties are realigning, but they're not really realigning. They're both pro-war, although we did have 57 Republicans vote against that funding for Ukraine. You would think it would be 57 progressives voting against it. But that's what I mean about the flip. Now, instead of having 57 progressives vote against war, we have 57 right-wing conservatives vote against war. So that's the flip I mean. Where do you see it leading for our political parties?
I don't know, Jimmy. I don't do that kind of prediction. But I will say this. I've never seen the anti-war movement more dead. It doesn't exist right now. I mean, the fact that you have self-identified progressives turning around, voting for a bill, the majority of it is just a gift to weapons contractors. The result of it will be to put weapons in the hands of neo-Nazis inside Ukraine, to increase arms trafficking. People don't really know this, but Ukraine has been a hub of arms trafficking for 8 years now, since the proxy war that started when the U.S. backed a coup in 2014. It's going to get way worse with all the weaponry that is being flooded into there now, because this is one of the biggest arms transfers in history. So imagine the bonanza that this is going to be for arms traffickers. And where do those arms go? To shady people, to commit terror attacks. And so there's going to be a disaster for Europe. And look, the fact that the Squad and the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, some of whom were recently, a few months ago, were voicing concerns, like Barbara Lee, Pramila Jayapal, Ilhan Omar, Ro Khanna, they voiced some concerns about flooding Ukraine with weapons. For them to all turn around and without an explanation, just vote for sending the very weapons that they were warning about just a few months ago, it speaks to how dead the anti-war movement is in this country and how completely cucked or beholden so much of lefty media is, because all these politicians know that except for on the Jimmy Dore show or at the Gray Zone and a few other small outlets, they're not going to be even questioned, because their supporters are just there to cheerlead for them and not actually challenge them on their policies, even when they're selling out the most basic principles of what being a progressive is. And one of the most basic principles to me is being anti-war, at least showing some opposition to the military-industrial complex, not funding it with billions of dollars in taxpayer money.
Well, didn't Eisenhower have a quote that every bomb that is made, every gun that is manufactured is robbing a young kid of a meal or an education, or it's, he said it much more eloquently than I'm paraphrasing him, but that was a former president and four-star general said that was said 60 years ago, and things have only gotten 60 years worse. And so for the Squad to do that, I mean, that was a Republican saying that war funding steals from poor people. That was a Republican saying that. And now we can't even get the Squad to say it. The people who are supposed to be anti-establishment, the craziest lefties out there. But of course, they're not, because they're wholeheartedly embraced by the military-industrial complex funded media at MSNBC and CNN. And that's how you know that they're not your friend and they're actually working against you. And so this message of this show has always been, stop donating to Democrats and stop voting for them. And if you keep doing that, if you keep voting for Democrats in the face of this, you're just a nihilist. That's all you are. You've given up. You don't accept reality. That's what a nihilist does, not accept reality. And that's what you're doing by keep voting Democrat. You're not accepting that you are materially supporting evil. That's what you're doing. You're not supporting a lesser of fucking anything. You're supporting evil. And you're a nihilist. Hey, I'm on tour. Come see me in Irvine, California, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City, Washington. Washington? You mean Washington State?
Yes.
Yes. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all those tickets.